Hello, testing. Hello, everybody.
Can you hear okay? Can you hear okay? All right. So welcome, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with everyone and with my dear friend, Tim Selby. And I don't know who came up with the idea for this tonight, but we sort of both agreed, oh, let's do something. Oh, I think it was your idea. Let's do something. And then we decided to do it. And of course, Tim came up with the perfect title for the evening. Three teachings we can't live without. Three lessons.
Either one.
Three lessons we can't live without.
Yeah.
And I thought that sounded absolutely perfect. So what I thought we would do tonight is let's just kick it off. And maybe what we could do is after the first one, open it up for questions. And how long are we scheduled for?
6 hours.
An hour. Okay.
Ish.
So, Tim, maybe I'll ask you, what is the first of three lessons you can't live without from your tradition?
All right. Well, first, let me say thank you for inviting us in and being here on Monday evening. And I always, we do a lot of different events, but I got to say, like, our nights of just kind of getting together and chatting about whatever comes up with our two communities together they're some of my favorite nights of all. So really appreciate the invitation to be here and to be here together and doing something together. So the first piece, teachings I can't live without. The first one I want to highlight is the teaching on lament. In our world, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of hardship, there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of difficulty. And one thing I appreciate in our Christian tradition is the ability to express that, to feel that, to share it, to talk about it. Maybe we don't always do it that well, but it's certainly a big part of our tradition and something our tradition brings to us. I wanted to kind of highlight, the Psalms, I think, are in the Hebrew scriptures, the Psalms are a place where we hear a lot of pain, a lot of struggle, a lot of hardship. In fact, 1/3 of all the Psalms are Psalms of lament, are Psalms of the expression of pain and sorrow and difficulty. I wanted to just highlight a couple of them for you. Here's a few verses from the Psalms. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? My tears have been my food day and night, while people say to me all day long, where is your God? In these verses, you can hear the sense of the pain, the struggle that people pour out, that people express and feel in our lives. Often these Psalms end up with in a hopeful place, hopeful in the end. But we have to express our pain and our hardship and our sorrow and our struggle. And we see it also in the life of Jesus as well. We see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane saying these words, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow, even to the point of death. If it is possible, let this cup, let this suffering, let this hardship, let this be taken from me. Get a kind of bit of feedback. I don't know if we can turn it down or turn me down a little bit. Something's a little loud here.
How's that? That
I feel like I got better and you got.
That's because we.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Mine's off. Yours is.
Oh, gotcha. We'll switch back and forth. And then Jesus, even on the cross, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? This pain, this sorrow, the world we live in. We all experience pain and sorrow and hardship. One of the things I've appreciated about our Christian tradition is that it doesn't gloss that over. It's not a rose garden. We feel that. We can express that. We can share that, and we can pour that out. I think it's really important in terms of being a healthy spiritual person, the ability to express our pain, our sorrow, our hardship, and our difficulty. And so I wanted to lift this piece up. And I know in And the Buddhist tradition kind of really stems out of this awareness of suffering, like this whole journey coming out, this awareness of suffering. And so, as we kind of pour that out and express that and feel that, I was interested in how that kind of plays in the Buddhist tradition. Where does that go in your tradition?
It's so interesting because one of the things well, yeah, now you turn yours on. Okay, is that better? So one of the things that I'm going to address that in just a second, but one of the things is still getting a little bit of feedback. One of the things I lament in the sort of modern Buddhist tradition is that how are we doing it? We're still getting some. Yeah, there's an echo. Could we turn it down a little bit?
Maybe we'll go down.
Okay. What do you think, Rourke? Maybe it's better. Rourke will figure it out if anybody can. There we go. So one of the things I lament about the modern Western Buddhist tradition, and this might resonate with you a little bit in sort of modern Christianity, is that we've wanted to sort of lose that piece and just talk about the flip side, the joy, the exaltation, the, exuberance, the whatever it might be. But it's so interesting you brought that up. It's such a relief because when I was in my late teens, like many late teenagers, I had a hard time. I was very, very anxious and pretty withdrawn. And in those days, there was this image that came from Ken Kesey's electric Kool-Aid acid test, which was you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. In other words, this is the age of Aquarius. We're all going there. You're on the bus, you're not, and I thought I was completely off the bus and I felt completely lost. And it made it much worse rather than better. And then, like so many people in my generation, I read Hermann Hesse's somewhat fictionalized account of the Buddha's life in the book Siddhartha. And what I learned was that after the Buddha's long journey, his long, very, very arduous journey, and he grew up like many of us could in a nice, they say at the palace, but who knows, in the history, nice home, very upper class. His father was a prince of some kind. And when I learned that after his long journey, he came back and instead of saying, oh, I found everything, this is it, I'm on the bus, where are you? Come on, we did it. In fact, he spent 2 weeks after his enlightenment and he said, nobody can understand what I've experienced. And some of his old comrades came back to him and said, please, we need what you have to say. And so he taught what is referred to as the Four Noble Truths. And the first noble truth is, just as you're saying, that life as we know it now is fraught with frustration, disappointment, distress, disease of all kinds. This is the first, and I thought, wow, the guy's like clearly had one of the great awakening experiences of all time. And this is what he felt that we needed to know. Then he went on from that and said, this is the truth of suffering. Then we talk about why is this the case? Why do we feel such dissatisfaction? And of course, we could talk for years about it, but in very short, we've lost connection with who we are, with our heart, our being, our nature. We've lost connection, so we're lost. And then the third noble truth is the possibility to come back home to oneself and to resolve one's life in that way. And then the fourth is how to do that, the path of learning and contemplation and meditation. So for you, that first lesson from your tradition, like, how did that land when you heard? I mean, like, was that something you came to early or have come to later or?
Yeah, I think it's there. I think it's just life, right? It's what we all experience. And so being honest about that, the experience that we have is so foundational.
Yeah.
Remember there was a woman one time, she came up to me and she apologized and she said, I'm really sorry like every time I come to church, I just start crying, and she was apologizing, right? And I'm like, it's if there's any place you should be able to cry or just feel the emotion that you feel, it should be in this place, right? It should be that should be natural. And there's this idea you made me think of, like, the Christian tradition. There is a lot of, like, kind of a push of, like, it's happy, we're all happy. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. It's all good. It's all, it's all your best life all the time, right?
Yeah.
And there's that sort of push. And so people might think, like, well, if I'm having a hard time, if I'm struggling, if I'm in pain, and I have
It's the
things to
same.
talk
Yeah,
about, maybe I
exactly.
don't belong there. It's like,
That's right.
that's crazy. That's just the human journey, and we're all on it, and we're all in it together. And if we can walk that road together, honestly, authentically, who we are, how we feel, what our emotion is, that's how we grow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead of putting, you not come and put on a face, like, I'm put on a show for something. And you and I as a leader, like, if we can be authentic about our own struggles and our own hardships and our own reality, that
Well, that's
speaks so
beautiful,
much.
because when someone comes, like this person you were talking about, comes to a place and that is acknowledged right up front, you feel like just in the walls, you're seen, you're heard, you're acknowledged, you're honored.
Mhm.
And that is such an opening. Of course, people cry. It's
Right.
beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. For me, that's a teaching we can't live without, because we all have the struggles of life, to be honest, to feel those, to express those, to live through those, and grow through those together.
Yeah.
We can't live without that. We got to have that.
And so this is why, this is kind of my lessons, 1.2, which is consequently this life. We call this life in the Buddhist tradition a precious human life. And it's precious because we're born in a situation, in a time where we're allowed to study these kinds of things. We're not in a war zone. We have our senses about us. We live in a time and place where people can come to a place like this. This is possible. We live in a time and a place where great teachers have lived, in this case, Christ and the Buddha, that we can still learn from them and the tradition that comes from them. And so this is a very, very rare opportunity, because if we look around, there's very few places where this is true, very few people, much less taking birth in other forms, like animal forms, for instance, that we have this precious human birth, and we have an alternative or an option to resolve this sorrow, to resolve this whatever confusion, separation, disconnection. So then this is the message, that we have this precious human birth. Now we need to do something about it now, because we never know when we're going to have it again. We don't know what's going to happen after we die, and whether we'll ever have this situation again. So that's both, for me, the Four Noble Truths is both being heard and seen and acknowledged. I mean, for me, I thought to myself, this guy's reading my mail. How did it was transformative just in hearing that was the message, with nothing else.
Nothing else. Yeah.
So we have a chance to hear that and then actually grow into something from that. Yeah, beautiful. Should we open it up for?
Sure.
Is there more?
Yeah. Well, just maybe think of a funny story. Like, the only time we have is now, right? We were in Hawaii on spring break, and we were going to some surfboards, and we were in there. We were talking to the guy that was in there, and my son was saying to him, well, do you think it'd be better today? Like, are the waves gonna be better tomorrow? Should we wait till tomorrow? And the guy says, yo, brah, we only have today. And we said, yeah, we'll take the boards. Yeah. But any thoughts about the expression of your laments, your sorrow, your pain, your suffering? Any
That's so beautiful.
thoughts about any of that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, they're pondering.
I think that's almost a harder message now, even than it was, because I don't know, just the way culture is going. I think that we're so eager to get some sort of solution that we don't want to explore actually what the condition.
We want the resolution.
Yeah. Before we,
I find that in my own life. I feel like, when I'm grieving or something's difficult, I feel like I know how to do this. I know how this works. Like, if I just do it right, it'll go quicker.
Yeah.
You know, how's that work? You know,
And the
doesn't go
sign of
quicker.
your spiritual maturity
Yeah.
is that you don't experience those things,
Right.
which
Yeah.
actually nothing could be further.
Or we cover it over, and actually
Yeah.
we don't.
Yeah.
Even though inside we're
Yeah.
dying, but on the outside we're smiling. You know.
You know, there's a very beautiful, a very interesting image that I just ran across yesterday, which is for normal people. This will sound contradictory, but it's not. For normal people like us, the pain that we feel is like feeling an eyelash in the palm of our hand.
Mm.
But for great beings who have really plumbed the depths of our experience, the pain that they feel is like sticking that eyelash right in their eye.
Mm.
Things become more acute, more heightened,
Right.
more poignant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Is there anybody online, Rochelle? Who's the MC? Oh,
we do,
me.
Tim, we do have a raised hand online. Catherine.
Hi, Tim and Tim. It's great to see you. I'm really glad. This is an awesome topic tonight. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately when we talk about how awful it is, ain't it awful, and how terrible it is. And these are unprecedented times. And then I think, but they're not. You think about what Jesus said, what the Buddha taught, thus it ever was. I mean, there is suffering. I mean, the slaves in Egypt didn't exactly have it so easy. And so I just think about all we get to do is develop our compassion and our being with and our, as Elizabeth Namgyal says, can you bear it? It's a great teaching of hers, and I love it. Can you bear it? So sometimes when I feel so incredibly, I do, I don't, I watch almost no commercial news. I have my other, we all choose our sources that we feel okay about. And, sometimes all there is to do is to just be with it and can I bear it? And so maybe you could speak a little bit to, what are some of the tools in both, our tradition of Buddhism, your tradition of Christianity, which is an early part of my life. But, I'm just really interested in what you have to say about that. And thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That's good thoughts and good question. I think as what do we do with it? I think you kind of put it nicely there. Sometimes we just feel it, and sometimes we have to just be with that. I think being in community is helpful. That we don't do it on our own. We're never quite doing any of the hard stuff on our own. We're always doing it together, and people help us to share the burden. That's what compassion, that word means, to suffer with, to be alongside, to walk alongside, that we do that for and with one another in community. And I want to speak to a little bit of hopefulness, which is in one of my later points. So I'm going to hold on to that right now. But what do you recommend people do with that?
Well, I think anything other than being with it is what we're now referring to as spiritual bypassing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's it. Now, how to be with it? There's, we have a lot to say about it, that, and Buddhism, we have a lot of method, which I think one of the things that sort of distinguishes Buddhism is, it's very method heavy, but the spirit is that we learn to be. So that gets to my second point, which my second teaching that I feel is so important, which is that mind creates our world. When we have an agitated mind, we see an agitated world. When our mind is relaxed, we see a world that's open and inviting. When mind is warmly predisposed, we walk into a world of friends. So this is how we change the world, by working with our mind. This is everything. And as Anais Nin said, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So this is why training to tame our mind, relax our mind through meditation, clarify our mind, through contemplation and study and connect with the world. This is how, yeah, for me, this is the second thing, which is now, okay, so it's true that everything is unsatisfying. Then what do? Then we work with that mind of dissatisfaction. And then as we work with the mind of dissatisfaction, actually, we change our entire world. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I want to ask you a couple of questions about that. And I know that like my mind is like not tame. And that's what So I need a lot of this. And I know that's a whole lifetime of practice that does that. It was not some quick fix to how we tame the mind. But I'm wondering, how do you recommend people do that in, for example, in the world we live in now, if I just focused on the day, look at the day we're living in right now. I'm like, it's like paradise, right? And I'm enjoying my life and things are fine, I could be very sort of like chill, if you will. If I'm watching the news all day, I'll probably be the opposite of chill, But there's value in both those things in some way. So how do we manage the chaotic world out there, and how do we manage taming our mind in a crazy world and wanting to be engaged, but also not too engaged?
Well, I mean, it seems to me that, in fact, sort of as a metaphor, the Buddha's journey is our journey. That for some minutes every day, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it might be, we go on our own retreat by sitting down, closing the door, and allowing ourselves, as we were saying before, to be present with our experience. This is the act of meditation. So unless we have some sort of balance point in our life, then our life is just, it's just a flag in the wind. The wind blows and our whole life is like that. But as we learn to come back again and again and again to who we begin to intuit, we just know that there's something there that is untouched, a kind of a sanctuary, a sureness, as John O'Donohue would say, a seamlessness. It's our basic nature. Our basic nature is a safe place. It's an unchanging place. It's rich, it's whole, it's connected, it's warm, it's clear. That's who we are. That is why we're dissatisfied, because we know that there is something that's available to us, but we instinctively run out to find it, and we can't find it. The image is like a beggar in a marketplace. The beggar goes out into the marketplace to beg for food, takes it back to his hovel, and cooks it over his hearth, not knowing that his hearth is pure gold. In other words, it's all here, but we're looking for it out there.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That makes me think of Richard Rohr often says, it's so simple, we miss it.
My teacher used to say, if he said it once, he said it 1,000 times. It's so easy, we don't trust it. It's so close, we don't see it. It's the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So number 2
Coming
for you,
back to
Tim?
that, yeah. Well, I'm still pondering that one for a bit. So number 2 for me is someone's talking really hitting on a bit this past Sunday, which is uncommon love, or you might say uncommon grace. And Tim and I have been recently talking with some of our other colleagues about the difference between love and grace. Is there a distinction, or is it the same thing? But I really love in our tradition that Jesus teaches us to have an uncommon grace, an uncommon love. It's easy to love those that love you. If you're good to me, I'll be good to you. It's all great. But there's a deeper way of being than that, and we see it in these stories and parables in the scriptures. Parable of the prodigal son. He takes all his dad's inheritance and he goes out and he wastes it and he hurts his father and he comes back. And maybe he should be allowed back. Maybe he should be allowed back in, or to work his way back in to earn his spot. And immediately he's just greeted with a party, a celebration, And a lot of people are like, well, that's not fair. That's not right. There's other scriptures of workers in a vineyard. They work all day and then some guy shows up like with an hour to go. And at the end of the day, they get paid, and they get all paid the same. And everyone's mad, except this one guy's not mad, right? Everyone's mad. That's not fair. And you said, well, you know what? I gave you what we agreed upon. I just was gracious to this guy. It's my money. I can be gracious to who I want to be gracious to. But we kind of that's not fair. Or I think of
In other words, love is now earned.
it's always more than people maybe even want it to be.
Yeah.
And so I could go on and on with teachings about this, but it's always heartbreaking to me that this in our tradition that's so steeped in this uncommon grace or uncommon love, this way of being is known as judgmental, and we ascribe people to hell, and we do all these kind of things when we're in this tradition that really teaches us that the love and grace of God is it's more than you or I think it should be. It's bigger than that. It's always bigger. It's never smaller. It's never, oh no, it's always bigger. And yet it's kind of heartbreaking that our tradition is not known for that type of grace or love.
Or generosity.
I mean, in some senses it is, I guess, but in some senses not. So to me, can't live without that teaching that that calls for that sort of grace that knows no bounds, that draws all into it, and is always bigger and wider than people even maybe think it ought to be.
So is that your second or your third?
Two.
Because that's my two. You already said my third.
So how does it play for you then?
Well, let's open it up just for a few more minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks. I hear you talking about abundance of grace, and then the person online spoke of, being satisfied with what we have, and then before it was, it feels like sometimes we as a society, and sometimes even in traditions, focus on what we lack or what we don't have. And I know in the Buddhist tradition, it is, we're born perfect, and, then we shed all those things. So I'm curious how in both traditions we can focus on the abundance that we have, even in these times that are not so unprecedented, as the guest online said, and say whether it's a sunny day, community, as you said, Tim, time or grace or whatever it is, how do we practice that in community to focus on the abundance that we do have?
Great question. Thanks for that. Yeah. So it's such perspective, isn't it? Like I was thinking not very long ago where like I've been around a long time. So I have a house in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is hard to have now, in case you haven't known. Like what a amazing thing, but have you seen the houses around my house? Like I start thinking, man, my house kind of sucks. I'm like, and then I have to be like, what in the world? How could it, it's so skewed. So I think I love your question that the abundance that we so often have is so rich. But we're constantly sort of, I don't know if we're pushed or just distracted to try and look like to see what we don't have or what we lack or what somebody else has to recount the gifts of every day, like. So in our church on Sunday morning, a couple of years ago, we were kind of talking about exactly that, So we just start every Sunday morning by when everybody comes in saying, "What are we thankful for today?" And we just go around and people raise their hands and we just shout out our gratitude because that's where we want our mindset to be, on the gratitude. And you get very far into that, and I kind of feel like the scarcity is kind of pushed aside because once I start recounting the abundance and the blessings that I have, it's rich. So yeah, how do we keep our focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, we have this idea we have this teaching that I've mentioned before in the past, this idea of 4 boundless attitudes: love or loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So this gets to the third one, which is joy. And there's 2 kinds of joy. The kind that you're talking about is appreciative joy. I mean, and you said it perfectly. That's what we need to know. The other kind of joy, which is called empathetic joy, I think is the most transformative, most immediate, and sublime experience. And it's just a turn of the head, which is taking joy in other people's joy. When you take joy in other people's joy, the whole world lights up. There's no end of friends. The barriers between you and the world just go down. And it's a very simple practice. For instance, if you're walking down Macon Avenue on a Friday night and you hear some maybe teenagers or young guys, maybe they're drinking or like, they're making a lot of noise. And typically you'd say, oh, those damn kids, why don't, why don't they go home and meditate or something? And instead, just take a moment and just remember who you are and what you're about and who you say you are. Tilt your head a little bit, say, how wonderful that they have friends, that they're having a good time. And just with that attitude, the barriers between you and the world fall down and is replaced with a deep quality of connection. So, and it's the simplest thing. It's just a turn of the head.
Well, you said something so critical, I think, that to feel joy at other people's joy. Yeah. That's such an amazing thing. And the flip side of that is to feel pain at other people's pain, and that's what it means to be in community. That,
yes.
Like
that's compassion.
Yeah. And then that abundance is because it's not about me anymore. It's about us. And then, that gets in there. Talk about the guys on the street. I've always kind of thought about that in terms of like, thinking of like, well, like, what if those were my best friends, like, and, the idea of like, or when you meet somebody for the first time, thinking of them as like an old, long lost, like really close friend that you haven't seen in a long time. Just the intentionality of how you encounter people can be so powerful,
And it's just intention.
Yeah.
It doesn't require great study or many, many years of meditation. It's just and so this is the meditation piece, which is being in touch with how I'm creating my world right now.
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
Yeah.
Tim, we have 2 hands raised online.
Abundance. Thank you. To go back to the idea of scarcity and abundance, I was hearing equanimity in my own head as you spoke, Tim, at Tim's. And I'd love to hear you riff on the concept of enough, of sufficiency. It is enough, as opposed to, I need this abundance or everything's scarce.
I get a little tripped up when I hear that too.
Yeah.
It's a lovely word. And I learned to keep my mouth shut because I don't want to be the jerk in the room, but it is a little pumped up. The Buddha said that contentment is the greatest wealth. So there you go. That's all I had to say.
Well, it makes me think about, in the Lord's Prayer, this prayer of give us this day our daily bread. Like enough, it's not necessarily a lot. It's not necessarily abundance even. It's enough. Give us what we need, give us what we need for this day. Such a simple prayer, but boy, in our culture, man, enough is it's never enough, right? And
that's the problem. If we adopt that as a spiritual teaching, abundance, then there's no end to it. There's no end point to it because you can never have enough abundance.
Yeah.
But you can have contentment.
Yeah. And we were just talking in our interfaith group like last couple weeks ago or whatever, that like in the Christian world, it's success is all about numbers, right? It's more people and it's more money and it's more this and more that, it doesn't hit the question you're talking about, Marie, that like what really is that, and for me it's one thing we've been talking about lately. It's being emotionally healthy people who are being emotionally healthy spiritually as well, and the numbers game of that, is, defines success. But, if you look at the model of Jesus, he doesn't look very successful, right? And his, 12 band of close followers all kind of ended up, not very successful either, but on a different level, very much so. So great question. What's enough, and how do we know what that is? Yeah.
Let me see if I can word this correctly. So there's a lot of talk. Everybody's talking about how terrible things are. I mean, we have a lot of problems in the world. On the other hand, in the big picture, this particular time and is only a speck in the big picture. I mean, if you look at the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River, took millions of years to carve that. We are just a speck in the big picture, and we need to focus more on what we can do, just being content with what we have and doing what we can for someone else, but not lamenting the horrible conditions that are going on now. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, my view is like, we have challenges now. People have always had challenges, right? Like what era in human history do you want to live in that, like we have our challenges, and I think some people had a lot worse, and some people maybe had a little bit of a smoother ride in some ways, whatever. But yeah, I think, I think to your point, we want to live in the moment we're in, and when people talk about times are bad or hard or difficult, I always think, from a spiritual perspective, like, that's why we're here, that's our work, right? So like I would love the world to be just the way I want it to be, and then I get to live in it and everything's good. But it's never that way. And so when times are difficult, that's when the spiritual work really is heightened, that when love needs to be shared and connections need to be built and friendships need to be made, the harder things might be, the more important the work really is. So for me, I kind of view it as whatever the circumstance, some people lived in the midst of World War II, or the Civil War, or the Great Famines, or the Black Plague, they didn't want to see their, they didn't want to see their card come up on that era, right? But that's what they got, right? And so wherever we are, whatever things are happening in our world, that's our place. That's our place to do the work that we feel important about. And so I just kind of view it as that's our, whatever it is, meet the challenge of the day and the time that you're in. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I've thought about this obviously nonstop for quite a while and taught about it. My teaching is as much just me working out something's in my head and call it a teaching. But, I think that what you say is true. Having said that, as I was coming, I was driving somewhere today, and I was hearing a report from the head of the UNHCR about the hundreds of thousands of children who have already died because USA funding was pulled. So because we love people, because our heart it's natural that we grieve when other people are in pain, I think it makes complete sense to be upset and outraged. Having said that, compassion, this urge to benefit and the help and the urge to protect people, has to be mixed with wisdom. We say that these are two wings on a bird. Wisdom without compassion is cold. Compassion without wisdom is blind. So we need the wisdom then to know how to engage the situation in a way that's skillful and enduring and effective. And if the whole thing devolves into hatred, then we've lost the war completely. So I think that as a deeply felt, perhaps spiritual person, we can be outraged, we can be angry, we can feel a certain sense of great certainty, but that is out of care. Just like a mother would have, would if she saw her child walking towards the street, with great urgency would do whatever she could do to stop. This is love. So I think it makes a lot of sense, but we need to keep wise that we don't add to the problem rather than be an agent towards fixing the problem, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. So I agree with our online friend that the times are precedented. Every generation has had catastrophes and issues, but something that is pretty unique about today is the speed at which information is being that we have access to. And I was just wondering, as leaders in the community, have you been able to encounter people that stay engaged with local and national and international politics and have actually allowed that to expand their capacity for compassion and love? And if you have, what's the difference between people in that group and a lot of the rest of us, where it makes us feel distrustful and makes us feel hopeless? What are they doing different?
This gets to my third.
Oh, good. I'm holding back.
Okay, good. Should I pop it on you?
Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this gets a little bit into that. So if my third teaching that we can't live without is the natural truth of suffering and the possibility of ending it. That's the first. If the second then was that we resolve our world through mind. Mind is every single moment of experience is a mental experience. So again, when mind is calm and clear, our world is similarly calm and clear. The third for me is, I would say, in the particular tradition that I come through in Buddhism, which is generally, for the most part, landed in Tibet or the Himalayas. The gospel of our church, and I think the gospel of your church, but I won't speak for it, is that we are all inherently, innately perfect. And that never changes. It's not something that was given to us. It was not something that was created by causes and conditions. It's not something that was born at some point. Therefore, it doesn't end. It won't change because it's not based on causes and conditions. It's always present. So the way we begin to experience this, again, is through meditation. To come back again and again is just the method of meditation is just like a little game so that we don't bounce all over the walls. Come back again and again, and we just learn to spend time with ourselves, and we begin to sense that there is something deep down inside. And I know the contemplative Christian tradition is all about this. This is unchanging nature, this fundamental goodness, this pure nature, that we begin to taste it. You can't find it because it's not a thing, but we intuit it, we feel it. And when we intuit it and then we feel it, we begin to settle down because we have this sense that, wow, I'm beginning to find what I've been looking for. And as we settle down, the next step, I think, is the most miraculous step of the entire spiritual journey, which is we realize if I am inherently good and screw it up constantly, what about other people? Maybe it's possible that we're all in the same boat, that we're all actually perfect. And then because of karma and our conditioning and our, we haven't found it. As I think Gregory Boyle said, they just haven't found their goodness yet. And so that opens up the possibility of tremendous compassion. Just like me, when you discover yourself, you discover everybody's selves and you find them good. And then your world changes. This is how your world changes. Now you look out at the people who used to irritate you and bother you and sort of piss you off constantly. Now you look out at people that you deeply understand and you deeply respect because you know the struggle they're going through, because it's the struggle that you go through. And this is the culmination. This is what we refer to as pure perception. And at this point, we see the God in everyone, the perfection in everyone, the Buddha nature in everyone. So for me, this is the most beautiful. This is again the gospel of our tradition. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You use that word settled, and that made me think of your question that is it the people that have found that place of being able to be settled, so they're engaged, but they're settled somehow. They're kind of grounded and settled in a way. Because when you asked that question and you described that, I was like, I want to be like that, connected, but settled. That's a great word at the same time, not frantic, not.
That's right. My teacher used to say that that suffering, samsara, or whatever you might say, is a mind turned outward, lost in the pathways, shiny things of the world. Peace, nirvana, enlightenment, whatever it might be, is a mind here resting in its own place. So this is the entire journey, you could say, and this is not metaphoric, is from going out here to actually resting right here. And we can taste it. It doesn't, we can taste it just for a few seconds. But when we start getting the scent of it, then we're really on the trail. And that's the spiritual journey.
I want to hit my third one.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump off the nirvana piece on that. And also, we don't use the word perfection as much, but we've talked about this. We have this exact same thing of that we're created in goodness and blessing.
And
we screw it up and we get broken along the way. But it's a coming back home is what it is, rather than.
So don't you say that you're born as in the likeness of God?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my last piece was the sense of the hope of what's to come, right? That we have this hope of what's to come beyond all of this, beyond this life, beyond this reality. And I want to lift up a phrase from the Book of Revelation, and I kind of smile when I say that because I think the Book of Revelation is like the most misapplied writing, and maybe of all time. That it's this sort of cryptic writing from the first century. Applied to situations they were going through in sort of coded language, and it becomes like what anybody wants to see in it from there on out, right? And it's always the end of the world, right? I remember like when I was like 22 or something, I don't know why I remember this. I was at a Chinese restaurant, and this guy was trying to convince me that it was the end times, like the end was near, it was gonna, I'm having Chinese food, and I'm thinking, yeah, I don't really think so, and like 40 years later, it's like. You could have that same comment. Everyone always thinks it's the end, right? Like it's, so I think there's times I wish that the Book of Revelation wasn't even in the scriptures because it gets used in such painful ways, I think sometimes. But at the end of it, there's some really beautiful piece of what is to come, and one of that parts says, and there will be no more crying and no more pain, and every tear will be wiped away, and there will be no more death. And it says you won't need the lamps or the lights, you won't need the sun because God will be their light. It's just a beautiful image of something to come. And we don't get a lot of that in the Christian tradition. Like for those of you part of the Christian tradition, there's not much description of what comes next. In fact, the closest that Jesus gets to that is in the Gospel of John, where he says, I go to prepare a place for you. In my Father's home, there are many rooms, if you will. Yeah. And so, and I love that when Jesus brushes up against that, he uses the description of home, and in the most beautiful sense of home, that the idyllic home, the place where you belong, the place where there's laughter and there's love and there's joy and there's goodness, and you always find your place. So I love that our tradition gives us hope of what is to come, and I know it's kind of the Buddhist has a lot of teachings around that, but I love that sense of I have no idea what that is, but I sort of just trust in my bones that there's beauty to come beyond this as well. Like this is beautiful, and there's beauty to come up front of that as well. So,
yeah, we would say it's so interesting because as I think we've realized over the last 20 years of discussing these things. I actually think that from a Buddhist point of view and a Christian point of view, there's very little blue sky. There's very little difference. There's one piece, which is, as you know well, which is called the question of first cause. So the extension of that is that the proverbial home that we go to, we would say is right here. That heaven and hell are right here. They're not something later, they're right here in the moment. And my teacher always used to say that he said, birds fly far from the nest, but at night they know how to come home. We are like birds who have flown from the nest, but we've lost our way home. So we would say that it's all right here. But I think we're talking metaphor here at this point, not direct experience. So,
And that's all the
Yeah.
same.
I think
Oh,
it
that
comes to
it all
exactly the
comes
same
back
thing.
home.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's just trying to get home. I mean, I think that's
Mhm. Yeah.
the human
And
condition.
conversely, you're always there all the time.
Exactly. That's the quandary of it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But you're always here. In other words, it's not, we would say that it's not something
Mhm.
that happens in the future.
Yeah.
It's happening right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the exact same thing. Yeah.
And a contemplative Christian would say that.
Oh, yeah. Jesus
So
says the kingdom of God is among you.
Yeah. So
Don't look for it here or there. It's
In other
among
words,
you
the
now.
idea of the future heaven, that's metaphoric.
Mhm.
Isn't, yeah.
Yeah.
That's, or
It's all.
I don't mean to put words in your
Well,
mouth.
no, it's both. Yeah, it's both.
I don't want you to get it kicked out of the church or something.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's open up. We've got a few
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
D.
ID.
Hi, thank you both. You mentioned Siddhartha before, and that was one of the pivotal books in my life. And I was raised in the Jewish tradition, and I kept looking for answers, and I couldn't find them. But there was a book written by Martin Buber, who was a Jewish philosopher, and he wrote a book, I and Thou. And he talked about that there's me, there's you, but when we connect, there's something so incredibly special that's neither me nor you, it's us, but it's thou. And that I think in some ways left me open for the path to Buddhism and how important community is and how important Sangha is. So I see, and I've never seen the two of you speak before, and the two of you are just representing that. And so I think when people speak about how bad times are, I think for me, I need to remember community. I just, because I I know that in World War II, most of my family perished, and now it's so important. And thank you both, because that's what you're demonstrating for me watching this tonight. So thank you a lot.
I would say, yeah, thank you, Dee. I'm playing off of that. I don't know if this makes sense, but like in this room tonight, like I can breathe really well. Like the sense of what's in the room, the sentiment that's in the room, the love that's in the room, the hope for the world, all that. I don't know if you feel that, but I can breathe in here.
Yeah.
The world may be chaotic. I can breathe easier in here, and it's powerful when people are together.
Yeah.
Do the Buddhists still believe in reincarnation? Or is that something?
Yeah, you mean, did we stop believing that at some point? We technically, normally we use the word rebirth, but since we would suggest that since the sort of kernel of our being didn't begin at any time and didn't begin on the basis of causes and conditions, that it won't end as well, that it goes on and on and on. So yes, we believe this is why we talk about developing maturity in this life, minding in other words, living a moral life in this life, because that conditions our next life. One time I was having a discussion with my teacher up in his hermitage in the hills of the Annapurnas. And we were getting into this about rebirth. And I was sort of giving him my clever bullshit back. and he did something he never had done before. He said, Tim, he said, I'm an old man. He said, there are past and future births. And I said, okay, boss, I got it. And the nature and quality of our next birth is completely dependent on what we're doing in this life. Yeah. What else? Anybody else online? Yeah.
I think it's really interesting being here and seeing the fusion of multiple religions, but that it's all the same calling, that we're all here for the same purpose, to spread this love and joy and to prevent or approach this suffering. But Tim, you said that being in this room, it's a community sense and you get this greater calling that you're with like-minded people. But how do you share the same moral compass that we have with people who don't have a same spiritual calling, with people who haven't found themselves yet? But how do you spread that love without forcing your own ideas upon them?
We would say that it would be inappropriate to teach to people who aren't open. And my sense is the most powerful way to open people up is probably not to have that intention at all, but just be with people. And people are very smart. If you've got something that they want, they'll go for it. So then they'll come back and say, what are you smoking? Like, what's going on? You know what I mean? So we would say take it very, very, very gently and very slowly, and but just being present with people, that heals people, like, deeply. And I bring a lot of that sentiment from the Christian tradition. This is what it means to witness people, to see them, to look at them, to acknowledge them. That alone will begin to open people up, and then they'll become interested. But don't lead with the message, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. I think, being, just loving people, being kind to them, and that, I also find just being curious about people, like I know as a pastor, like a lot of times I hate to say I'm a pastor because then, people are like, oh no, it's like, he's going to want to tell me what to think or what, but just being curious about people, like, because people say to me like, well, I'm not really Christian. So, great. Well, what's important to you? What do you value? What do you find really meaningful in life? And like, just like 100% of the time, it's all the same things. Maybe we say it a little different, but it's always, people and beauty and life and goodness but just, being curious about how people experience that and asking them to tell you their experience, I think is really beautiful.
I think that's how you change the world, is just be open to people and interested in people and care, and the rest takes care of itself. I don't think we have to do any great compassionate thing. We don't have to start another 501c3. We don't have to raise money. I think just noticing people and being interested, that changes the world. I'm really, really positive, certain of that. What else? Online?
We have one raised hand online. Larry?
Yes, what a marvelous dialogue this evening. I just wanted to couple on to what Dee was saying and what the two Tims were talking about, which is the prescience, really, of this relationship that Martin Buber is describing, and how that is somehow, in a mysterious sort of way, really kind of an imprint that you carry with you constantly, really, that really is there if you will simply dissolve into that kind of really purified kind of love that is really within that kind of a relationship. It's quite remarkable, really, it's so lovely, very lovely. Thank you so much, everybody. Okay.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, David. Well,
Can I do a 30-minute infomercial?
yes.
So
Here we go.
So yeah, right. Right. So I think like what happens like here at 8th and Oak Street in Steamboat Springs is amazing. It's fabulous. I don't know that like there's many places in the world that all the things that go on here go on in such a natural, beautiful way. And it's in the heart of our town. And I think it brings something to our community that's so special. So thank you all for being a part of that. We all make that happen together. There's some brochures on the table there if you're interested at all. We're just doing a campaign called Building for Our Future to make sure that we can keep this place amazing and awesome for us and for generations to come. It takes some dollars to do that. If anybody wants to help us do that, you can grab one of those there. So
Yeah, and thanks to the generosity of all those who made this possible. It's possible for the Muslim community, the Jewish community, and the Buddhist community to call this home.
right.
So it's tremendous. I think we have just a couple of announcements online, don't we?
Yep. Thank you to our online hosts, Kristen and Tyler, and Megan for room hosting. Our Karuna collection closed at the end of last week. Thanks so much for everyone who donated. Sangha voted by poll to give the donations to World Central Kitchen. The Buddha Center will match $1,000 of the donations, and that's it.
Well, thank you, Tim. Again,
Thank
as
you.
usual.
Always wonderful.
Yeah,
to be here.
and
Yeah.
thank you everybody for being here. Yeah.
Thank you.
We could go on like this for hours.